morning. This is Southampton Town Supervisor Jay Schneiderman. I'd like to call to order this work session of the Southampton Town Board on this 20th day of August 2020. Please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be seated. All right, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Supervisor Schneiderman.
Here.
Councilwoman Lofstad.
Here.
Councilman Martell.
Here.
Councilman Bouvier.
Here.
Councilman Schiavone.
Present.
All right, we're all here. So let's get started. You all should have the agenda. It looks like the first item is to review the draft agenda for the August 25th meeting. Now, we do have Ryan here too with updates, and we want to try to get at 10:30 to this Airport Noise Abatement Advisory Committee. So it's not a particularly long agenda. I guess Sunday you're looking to get it out and published. You want to, I guess let's try to stick to this. Ryan, is that okay with you?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine here. You do hit the agenda first, and then we can do updates later.
Okay, so this is for the August 25th meeting that will occur at 6 p.m. At the town board meeting room, and at town hall. That's going to be an in-person meeting, and we may have to do a hybrid. John, are you able to attend an in-person meeting, or would you prefer to do a hybrid call-in, Zoom?
I'm still waiting to know if I'm able to return, so I should know this afternoon.
Okay, so we'll have to make a provision if you're not, or if any of the board members are not able to be present. The hybrid thing didn't work out great, but it's possible that we could do that. So but we'll plan on an in-person meeting on the 25th at Town Hall at 6 p.m. Okay, so I'd like to then go through the agenda. There are a number of public hearings. Looks like 8 of them. The first one is a continuation of the Graves Protection Act, the protection of unmarked graves. We've discussed this at length. You're all familiar with this. The second one is the first of the 2 moratorium variations. The third public hearing is the second of the 2 moratorium variations. The fourth hearing looks at purchasing CPF lands. This is lands on, oh, sorry, this is not about a purchase of CPF lands. This would be amending the CPF plan, the management and stewardship plan for the property, the former IGHL property on McGee Street, so that it could be used for potentially for an aquatic center or indoor recreational type of use. The fifth is the public hearing on the acquisition of lands of Kotasuko LLC in Noyak. The sixth public hearing is amending Town Code Chapter 123, authorizing the extension of building permits and waiving applicable extension fees due to COVID-19. So as you're all aware, I did by executive order extend building permits for a 6-month period, those that were active during the pause period. Because it's a suspension of a local law, it has to be renewed every 5 days for the next 6 months. So it's a problem. I'd like you guys to consider making it actually a code amendment, so that doesn't have to happen. So this would allow that. And the 7th public hearing considers the lease of property located at 112 Old Riverhead Road, West Hampton Beach, for the purposes of a community center. I believe this is the one that is the lease with the option to buy. The second one, the 8th public hearing, is the potential straight out acquisition of the same piece of property. This is the former Rubio building on County Road 31, just sort of south of the airport, which Councilman Bouvier has been very involved in trying to establish a senior center, community center in that area. So this would allow that long-term goal of the town to be realized. All right, so those are the hearings. Any questions about that?
I do have one question. One of our add-ons has the same title as public hearing number 6. Add-on number 5. It's a resolution of adoption.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. Does somebody on the line who knows about that add-on, why that's maybe one of the attorneys?
You're muted.
I'm not sure about that. I can get that answer for you in a couple minutes, though.
Sunday, do you know why there's a separate resolution for number 6?
No, I'm not aware. It didn't generate from.
It may just be a duplicate.
I think one is a
Oh,
public.
one is an adoption. One is an adoption.
The other's a public hearing.
I'm sorry. Yes, one is an adoption, one is a hearing. I missed that. Sorry. Right. So that would allow it to be. This came up as a question. You know, a lot of these public hearings, we've been waiting 2 weeks, leaving the record open. I was asked about it, and I did not think that this one really necessitated leaving the record open for 2 weeks. So I wanted to make it available to you guys. You know, the sooner you pass it, if you just choose to pass it, the sooner I have to stop signing executive orders for that. So I said, go ahead, make it available. So it was done as an add-on. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the explanation.
Okay, yeah, when I first looked at it, I thought it was a second public hearing. But okay, so my misread. Okay, so let's go on to the agenda itself. John, the first resolution's yours. Can you read it?
The first one, yeah, I'm sorry. Town Board Resolution 2020-665 is co-sponsored with Councilman Martell and Councilman Schiavone. The resolution is to authorize the purchase from Delisle Concrete Corporation for a new sidewalk at Militia Green property using Suffolk County contract.
We had tabled this, and I believe that it probably should be tabled again until we can fully vet it.
Yeah, so there was that issue of
Well, yeah, we can handle.
not doing a standard sidewalk in that militia park, doing something more historically accurate. Maybe accurate is not the right word.
And
but
I know that
historically
the
appropriate.
Julie Green was in touch with Chris Fenton and also with Kristen Doulas. So that discussion started after your last discussion about this. So I know they're working on it.
All right, so it's likely we're going to table this one.
Yeah, we have that option.
Yeah, so we'll leave it on the agenda. All right.
Do
So
it
the
on
next
the
one's-
floor at the meeting.
all right, so 685 authorizes acquisition of lands of Bauer Forest Park LLC, Sagaponack. 686 authorized acquisition of development rights of lands of Peconic Land Trust, is contract FND in Eastport. 687 authorized acquisition of lands of Tusa in North Sea. 688 authorized acquisition of lands of Weiss in East Quogue. And Julie, you're next.
ID 34601, authorized change order for Baycrest Avenue Access Project.
34636, authorized supervisor to sign any and all documents for a governor's traffic safety grant.
34631, authorized supervisor to execute a 2020 renewal of the Bentley Systems Incorporated for their ProcureWare cloud-hosted software solution to manage the town's operation for bidding and contracts.
Town Board Resolution 34625 authorizes the supervisor to execute a contract with Alexander's Automated Meter Reading Solutions as sole source provider for the selling Versed probes, wires, repairs, etc. for the meter reading guns for the Hampton Bays Water District. Town Board Resolution 34622, authorize the supervisor to execute an agreement with Long Island Telecommunications and Electronic Services, Inc. for the portable radios at the Hampton Bays Water District.
All right, thank you, Rick. 34620, authorize the supervisor to execute any and all documents for a 5-year contract with Priority Dispatch for the town's police department.
Town Board Resolution 34632, authorize the supervisor to sign a donation agreement with the Boy Scout Troop 483 for cross-country trails, add markers, and install a trailhead sign and key at Red Creek Park. It's a great little project.
It sounds good. Okay, 34627, authorize the supervisor to sign consultant agreement with Susan Western to assist the Southampton Town Police Department to implement the Lexapol software system. 34635, recalls and amends resolution 2018-687 and 2019-255 and 2020-381 with Gentile Pismeni and Brengel LLP.
Town Board Resolution 34600, recall and rescind resolutions 272 of 2020 and 386 of 2020.
Town Board Resolution ID 34637 to recall and rescind Town Board Resolution 2020-667. Town Board Resolution ID 34638, a 2020 second notice to bidders for the STOP program household hazardous waste removal.
Hey, John, do you know, before you jump, on the 34637, the one that we're recalling and rescinding because it was prepared in error, what that resolution was?
Don't have that in front of me, but it was produced. It was issued in error. I think it was a duplication.
It was the IMA for isolate for recyclables.
Right. Thank you. Thank you.
It had some numbers wrong, or was just a duplicate?
Yeah, there was a calculation error, I believe. So we'll bring it back corrected.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Right, so 34640 is 2020 notice to bidders for Southampton Animal Shelter rooftop access ladder. John, you're next.
Yeah, I got two papers stuck together here. Town Board Resolution ID 34629, 2020 notice to bidders for closed top shelf contained ejector trailer with hydraulic roof opening. And that's for municipal waste. Town Board Resolution ID 34626, co-sponsored with Councilman Fiavoni, is a 2020 notice to bidders for demolition at 20 Larboard Road in Hampton Bays. This was a CPF demolition request.
What a property that had some sort of building on it. Okay.
Yeah.
34564 amends 2020 adopted budget for CPF land. Julie?
Town Board Resolution ID 34639, amend 2020 adopted budget for Flanders Farm Fresh Food Market Initiative.
34589 amends 2020 adopted budget for the Hampton Bays Water District. 34566 amends 2020 through 2024 capital budget for bulkhead repairs at Baycrest Avenue. 34567 authorizes closure of capital projects. 34585 deposits money into escrow account for professional services in connection with the change of zone petition application concern Southampton. 34561 authorize CPF tax refund pursuant to the first time home buyers exemption for Suli Disa. 34609 recalls and amends resolution 2020-587. This amount change, small amount. 34602 2020 standard workday and reporting resolution for appointed officials. 34,547, accepts retirement of Carl Cornelio. He is a maintenance mechanic 2 in highway. 34570, appoints Gabrielle Sirico to confidential secretary position in town clerk's office. 34296. Sorry?
I'm sorry, I sorry, I had a technical error there. Never mind. Apologize.
All right, 34296 appoints Joseph DePinto to building permits examiner position in building department. 34441 authorizes acquisition of lands of Codasuco LLC, Noyak, amending the CPF management plan. That was assuming we leave the record open for 2 weeks from the hearing. 34462, likely to say, oh no, yeah, we'll probably leave this open 2 weeks too. Change the target area and parcel and amend the CPF management and stewardship plan. One for the former IGHL property. We probably want to leave the record open a little bit on that one. 34584, road review application. Oh, sorry, this is John, this is yours.
Town Board Resolution ID 34584 is a road review application for Michael Saravodio, Suffolk County Tax Map 0900-29.00-02.00-010-000, Situate and Hampton Bays is accepted. And I believe that's the last on the draft agenda.
So we're going to the additional ones in the separate packet. There are 5 more. I'll read them all, though some of them are co-sponsored with other people. So 34641 rescinds Town Board Resolution 20-683. This was a technical error on the town's COVID-19 travel-related restrictions policy. 34642 rescinds Resolution 684. 684 is also related to that. Established a town policy regarding New York State employee benefits quarantine. There was a technical error, and a footnote was omitted. So then 34643 adopts town policy regarding COVID-19 related travel restrictions. So that's the corrected copy. 34644 is the corrected copy of the second one, adopted town policy regarding New York State Employee Benefit Quarantine Act leave and application procedures for emergency responders. And then the last one, 34645, is resolution of adoption amending Town Code Chapter 123, building construction, to authorize the extension of building permits and waive any applicable extension fees due to COVID-19. We discussed that earlier. So
I have one quick question on the previous one, 34643. Paula sent around an email on number 3, item 1. It says at the end of that sentence, and follow directions in item number 6, but there doesn't appear to be an item number 6.
is this in the 3rd section?
Yes, it's section 3, return to work guidance for essential workers. Number 1, no known exposure to COVID-19, etc. In the last sentence there, it says, follow the directions in item 6 below, but it doesn't appear there's an item 6. It goes up to 5, I see.
I have 6, Julie. It's exclusions and applications for leave.
I don't have it on my copy though.
I don't have it on mine either, yeah.
And I don't have it on mine, so.
All right, so John, you must have an updated one. So
I'm assuming.
So I'm assuming that the one that we're going to be adding to the agenda is the one that John has. So let's make sure, Sunday, that you have the correct version.
I'm in a Zoom meeting right now. I can't talk, but
I have the correct version as well.
You have the correct version?
Well, I have an item 6.
thank you.
Not an item 6.
All right.
All right, so Sunday,
Yes.
Councilman Bouvier and Councilman Scavone have the right version. Councilwoman Lofstead and I do not. I don't know about Councilman.
Yeah, I don't have it either.
All right, so 3 of us don't. The main thing is the one we're going to be putting on the agenda is the correct version with the item 6. So
Well, the one that I have does not have item 6. So hopefully someone will supply that to me so that we can have the right version in our system.
that's fine.
Okay.
Can somebody,
Thanks to Paula for pointing that out. I appreciate it, Paula.
can May, maybe May can forward it to Sunday?
We're gonna, yes, and we'll need to make the changes in our system in order to make it electronic and part of the agenda. So we'll work on it. We'll get it done.
Okay, all right. So is everybody okay with the agenda with that one correction?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, Sunday,
Yes.
you're free to publish.
Okay,
Okay, so we're running a little bit behind schedule. Ryan, we're probably gonna need more than 3 minutes for this, but we can run a little bit over then. So Ryan, thank you for joining us. I don't know if we're still talking about the storm. I'm sure we're talking about COVID still. Everybody got their power back. The answer better be yes. So, okay.
Yeah, the answer is yes.
All right. And
Yeah. Storm update, really nothing to report other than we've submitted claim to the county for costs associated with the tropical storm. Julie, you want to take over on the name?
Isaias.
Okay. We've submitted our cost recovery to the county. I have high expectations that we will be able to get some reimbursement on this because it appears that we might be hitting the thresholds countywide and hopefully statewide as well. That's about it on the storm. As far as COVID goes, updates with regards to progression there. If anybody hasn't seen, gyms have been allowed to reopen as of the 24th, but no later than the 2nd, I believe is the regulation right now from the new release. There are requirements, 33% capacity, MERV filtration rating of 13, and a few other, sanitizing requirements and things of that nature. I was on the phone with one of the health commissioners from the county this morning, and she's still not 100% sure on the guidance yet herself. It's being released from the state, and the county health is the, I guess you would say, enforcement authority. They'll be going in to do the places. So she's still kind of feeling it out, and we're working with them to give them a list of any known gyms, aerobic locations, karate locations, anything else that would fit the category within our jurisdiction.
Ryan, do we also have?
Yeah.
Ryan, do we have the information for them on gyms and fitness facilities that may be in the incorporated villages as well, or are they making a separate request to the villages?
I don't know whether they're making a separate request to the villages or not. They apparently have a list of 600 locations countywide already that they've rounded up themselves. I believe they're different from the state. Also, as with the other industries, when they went to open, the different businesses had to fill out an attestation form online with the state. I've been informed by county health that when those attestation forms are filled out by the gyms, the state is passing a list of them on to the local health departments daily. It's going to be a don't call us, we'll call you type situation here. Local health will set up the inspection with the gyms. They don't need to call the local health department. Once the attestation form is filled out, it gets forwarded to county health. County health will contact the gym or facility and go in and do the inspection on it. I've been told today that their intentions are that unless it's life-threatening type violation, they'll do a second inspection. So if they go in and they find out that the spacing isn't 100% appropriate in an area, they will advise them of such, I guess perhaps issue some sort of like a violation notice that they need to correct it, and then they'll be going back for a follow-up. I had asked about the possibility of there was a MERV 13 filtration rating requirement for their air handling systems. or there was an alternative, which was like minimum of a MERV 10 with positive air exchange to the outside at whatever rate. I said, well, the same thing happened with gyms, where if they have a certain filter rating, but if the doors and windows are open and there's positive air exchange to the outside, will that suffice? She didn't know the answer to that question yet. There's still, it sounds like, feeling out the guidance from the state. It hasn't thoroughly disseminated down at this point. So there are outstanding questions that
Yeah, I had gotten
are
a
yet
call.
to be determined.
I had gotten a
Other
call
than
from-
the gyms. What's that, Jay?
You know, I had gotten a call from a county rep too about helping promulgate the list of gyms. And I reminded her that the county had passed a law not, you know, a few years back requiring that every fitness
AED.
facility has an AED, an automated electronic defibrillator. So they must have a list of every place, you know, that fell into that category. So they must have that list somewhere.
So I mentioned that with Commissioner Drago this morning. She called me on behalf of Lisa Black, who you had, and
Yes.
so this is all like the loop is being closed on this one. And I mentioned the AED thing as well, because I don't know that the commissioner was there at the same time that I was with the county. Newer, I'm not 100% sure. And I think she was going to look into whether or not there was an AED list available that would correspond to gym facility, so that they could cross-reference against that too for the county. So between our list, whatever we give them, which the fire marshal's office is working on generating right now, because they have a lot of those, they deal with the businesses regularly, and the list that they've gotten from the state, the attestation forms that get filled out by each business, and if they have a list associated with the AED program, it should be fairly comprehensive countywide that they have, you know, these places checked out. The only other real update was the bowling alleys as well have been now allowed to open. That occurred at the beginning of the week. Gyms are in progress, right? They're opening as of the 24th, so we still have a couple more days out on that. And there is a deadline date. Like, they open as of the 24th, and they have to be open by the 2nd. I don't know what happens after that point, to be completely honest with you. If you're not open by the 2nd, does that mean you're not allowed to open at all? I don't have an answer to that question. But they did put a start and an end date on when gyms are supposed to be opening, which is a little different than what they've done with other things so far. It's been, as you meet the requirements, you can open. So we'll see what that amounts to. The bowling alleys are already allowed to open. There are obviously restrictions associated with that. I think it's every other lane is supposed to be left unoccupied to allow for distance between the bowlers, sanitizing of equipment, and bowling balls and everything else in between sessions and forth. So there's separate guidance that's been issued to the bowling alleys, and we have very limited amount of locations that are impacted by that within our jurisdiction too. Really countywide, I don't think that there's a tremendous number of bowling alleys, and they're pretty well identified countywide at this point.
Brian, is your department going around and doing inspections to make sure that everybody's complying with all of the guidance?
Yeah, we still are. We're still going around. We've issued violations recently for some social distancing issues with a couple of, you know, our restaurants and things. So we're still actively, as the particularly on the commercial side, the fire marshal's office, and on the residential side, the code enforcement division. As they're going about their normal business, they're addressing these issues if they come up. And then naturally, a lot of this stuff comes in by way of complaints. And so if we get a complaint through the system, they're going out and investigating and dealing with it as necessary.
I know the police have been doing similar. They really have upped their number of patrols. They're going into every establishment that has a liquor license. They're going in there more than once. They're doing frequent checks on these places. They've issued a number of violations and SLA referrals. I'm not going to name the places here in this forum, but there's been quite a few. We have a very, very active police presence throughout the town right now, making sure that everybody is complying with all of the state guidance. Can I ask you one other question, and then I'll turn it over to my colleagues on the town board? So we're approaching the the end of August. It's sort of approaching fall, and it's a popular time for harvests with all of our farmland. We have strawberry picking, we have pumpkin festivals. Everybody's familiar with Pumpkin Town, Pumpkin Land, whatever it's called, Pumpkin Town, I think. What is the guidance on these agricultural events, the corn mazes, the playgrounds that they have at some of these things, the picking events? Do you know, have they issued anything for these farm-related events?
To be honest, Supervisor, I'd have to go back and look into some of the guidance more specifically. At one point in time earlier on in the pandemic, there was some interim guidance that was issued by Ag and Markets with regards to farm stands and related activity at farm stands, which I don't know that there was specifically guidance that was issued for like agritainment, but it would probably be a blend of some of the low-risk outdoor arts and entertainment activities, along with the agricultural, like farm stand guidance. So we'd have to look at what the different places were specifically doing, and you know, if we have to refer it out for any additional approvals, we'll do so,
Yeah.
just to, you know, cover our bases on it,
Some
because
have
I
things
don't know
like-
that the guidance took it into consideration.
Some have things like hay rides and things like that. So yeah, let's try to bring it up on one of the calls with the state. Maybe they're like, I think this is on the North Fork, a bigger issue than it is here on the South Fork, but nonetheless, it's probably worth trying to get some guidance.
I will following this meeting, I will shoot an email over to Lisa Santaramo from the state, who is our control room rep, and ask if there's anything more specific that addresses what has become known as, you know, agritainment, as opposed to just farm stands out there that we might be able to utilize for the people that this impacts.
All right, thank you. All right, so let me kick it over to the other town board members. Any questions for Mr. Murphy?
I do. I have a quick question about the gyms. Can you give those dates about when the time frame they have to open between?
Yeah, it's to my knowledge, it's 8/24 is the start date, so next Monday, and I believe they're supposed to be open by 9/2.
So my concern, and as I know you said you'd check to clarify, is that what if they have to do some major installation of an air circulating system and they can't get it done in those 7 days or however many it is?
So I think that what based on the conversation I had with Commissioner Drago this morning from the county, my recommendation to a location like that would be that they do the best that they possibly can, submit for reopening, submit the attestation. The county has indicated that they will go in, and as long as appropriate measures have been taken, if there's an upgrade to an air handler, the county acknowledged already that as far as they were aware of, MERV 13 filters were in short supply because of the mall reopening. And so with mall reopenings drawing down on the filter supply, some of these locations may legitimately have a hard time achieving that MERV 13 filter rating. It sounds as if the county is willing to work with the establishments, county health, to achieve what they need to, as long as it's not going to be a serious threat to the occupants of the building at the time.
So I think I would like to reach out to the gyms in our area to let them know that, so they don't say, oh, I'm never going to be able to do it, forget it, right? So at least tell them that just submit it, open it like you said, and then go from there.
We can assist in getting that message out.
Thank you.
We can have all sectors and conduct outreach.
So Ryan, I just had a quick question. You may not be able to answer it, but a couple of weeks ago, or maybe more than a month ago, the state had imposed on malls filtering requirements. Are these similar in nature to those?
Yeah, it's the same rate. It's basically the same rating. There's a MERV rating that's attached to filters. Don't ask me what MERV stands for, because coming from the county, it stands for Major Emergency Response Vehicle. I have no idea what it stands for in terms of the filtration rating. I'm not an HVAC guy, but it's the 13. It's one of the highest ratings you can achieve on a MERV, on an air filter. The 13 is the same requirement that was imposed on the malls, which is why there's been a drawdown on the MERV 13 filter supplies out there, and why some of the gyms might have a hard time getting their hands on them. And with the malls, John, they also had like an alternative. It was either a 13, or I believe it was a minimum of a 10 or 11 with a positive exchange of air to the outside. So I had asked that question this morning, if the gyms might be allowed to do something similar, where they had a minimum of a 10 or 11 rating, but if they left doors and windows open and had positive air exchange to the outside to change out the air in the building, that would be satisfactory. And there was no definitive answer on that yet.
Guys, I have some people for the 10:30 that cannot stay much longer. So we're gonna have to jump into that conversation. And then, Ryan, if we have more questions for you, maybe we'll try to bring you back later if possible. You probably have a busy day ahead. If not, we can ask those questions to you directly, okay?
Sure, no problem.
All right. So I want to move on to the status update from the Airport Noise Abatement Advisory Committee. And maybe, Tommy John, you're directly involved with this and asked this to be on the agenda. Can you introduce us?
Certainly, and thank you, Supervisor, members of the board. The Southampton Aircraft Noise Advisory Committee has been continuing its work with this issue that has been really with the town for many, many years. This is not new. However, there have been some significant changes. I brought up in our March meeting the Eastern Regional Helicopters decision to open up a new route over parts of Southampton town rather than going over the North Fork to Robbins Island. They would be arriving via the southern route over Shinnecock Bay. So what we are seeing now is are more complaints and more people in the town of Southampton who are complaining about air noise overhead. And it really is, it's a quality of life issue. It's a safety issue. It affects property values. And then of course, you know, water and noise pollution is a concern over the town. So, you know, it's certainly significant and germane to this board and what we and how we operate. Primarily, this is an airport that we're concerned with that is in a neighboring jurisdiction. This is not our airport. We do not have jurisdiction over this, but we wanted to come to this board today because it does affect us. This is HTO, or East Hampton Airport. And for those of you who may not know, East Hampton Airport literally abuts Southampton's eastern boundary. And a lot of the ingoing and outgoing flights are over the town of Southampton. And believe me, if you are in the part of the town that's affected by this, it is just constant. And some of our constituents have really been dealing with this for a long time. So today, in the way of an update, this committee has not been before the board since the spring of 2017. So we do have a presentation that we're going to go through. Tara, would you, if you could put it up on our screen? I don't see it
yet. Would you like me to let people in?
Yes.
Yes, and if you would let John Corain and Ron Klausner in. And okay, John and Ron, are you in?
There might be some more people asked to get in. Let me see. Yeah.
I'm doing it now.
Okay.
John Corain, yeah, Ron Klausner.
And that's it. That's the only two who are going to be walking us through some of this information.
Okay, and Kathleen.
I mean, other people. Oh, Kathleen, of course.
Kathleen Murray as well.
Could you go to the second slide, Tara? Thank you. Thank you. So what we're doing today is going to be going through some of the points of a presentation that was given to the East Hampton Town Board in one of their work sessions East Hampton Town has contracted with a consultant, HMMH, and to do a report on the airport. And as you can see here, there's a significant increase in traffic and complaints. This report is public. This report is on East Hampton Town Board's website. And also I'm going to be disseminating it through the board today. It's a pretty significant report. And if you would go to the next slide, Sarah. I left the analysis overview portion. Again, this is from HMMH. And what they did and what they've been doing, they're conducting an ongoing survey from June 27th to September 30th, from 2015 to 2019. And they are still looking at the data. And the data points that they're looking at are operations as per the East Hampton Airport, as well as complaint noise. And you're going to see references in here to HTO. I just want to remind everyone that this is the East Hampton Airport, and the numbers that you are going to see are in a 3-month period between 2015 and 2019, and we really believe that the Town Board of Southampton should be aware of this. So I want to thank John Corain from the Hamlet of Noyak for being here, and Ron Klausner from the Hamlet of Watermill. They are going to walk us through this a shortened version of the presentation that was given to East Hampton. So, John Corain.
Unmute here. Hi, can you hear me? And you may be also able to see me. Well, Tommy John, thank you very much for inviting me to join you today, and to the Town Board. I really appreciate your attention to this important problem we have here on the east end of our town. I'm going to take you through the statistics that were provided by the town of East Hampton this past summer through the consulting firm that they had hired. And if I could bring your attention to page 4, you can go to page 4, thank you. What this first slide shows is the number of operations, and operations being flights in or out of East Hampton Airport. And again, to Tommy John's earlier point, this is just a 3-month snapshot. And I would like to remind you, and you're probably very familiar with this, the season out here on the East End is no longer 3 months. And nor is the season at the airport 3 months. This is a 12-month problem for those of us who are impacted by the airport. Just looking at the sheer percentages of growth in a 1-year time period, overall activity at the airport increased by 8%, almost 1,500 operations. I'd also like to just remind you, I think you already know, that East Hampton Airport is a landlocked airport. There is no all-water route to the airport, meaning that each of these operations is going to impact some family somewhere, and usually hundreds of families. You'll see in the complaint data that Ron is going to show you a little bit later on that there has been an effort to concentrate the flights and the operations over certain portions of our town this summer, which has really exacerbated the problems for those of us in the Noyak, North Sea, Sag Harbor area. In terms of the breakout of the activity increases, helicopters are up 7% in the year, land plane activities up 7%, seaplane activity up 23%. The undefined activities decreased, and that's because the tracking systems have gotten better so that they can classify the different types of aircraft. The 2019 operations continue to follow patterns from 2018 and 2017, which deviate from the restrictions had put in place. Just as a reminder, you may be familiar with the curfews that were put in place or tried to be put in place by the town of East Hampton back in 2015. Unfortunately, those curfews were overruled in a court ruling back in November of 2016. The curfew hours had been 8 a.m. to, 8 p.m. to 9 a.m., which means they restricted flights in and out of the airport at those hours. Unfortunately, today there are no restrictions. Aircraft fly in and out of that airport at all hours, day and night. If you could please switch to slide 5. This will give you a little bit more of a trajectory over the entirety of the observation period. So right now we're looking from 2015 to 2019. And you can see that in that time period, the increase in operations, meaning flights in and out over our homes, has increased 23%. Helicopters alone have increased 56%. Land plane activity, 11%. Seaplane activity, 40%. And again, because of the reporting accuracy, that category of undefined has reduced. The second bullet point there is the obvious observation of the data shows that helicopters and seaplanes have shown the largest percentage increase. If I could turn your attention now to page 6. On page 6, we're going to see the same type of information, but in a slightly different format. But you can see that from 2015 to 2019, during this 3-month time period, again, I'm going to keep reiterating, this is only a 3-month snapshot. This isn't showing what happens Christmas week. This doesn't show over Thanksgiving. This doesn't show the long holiday weekends. This doesn't show the commuter traffic with the pattern of people who now commute back and forth on a regular basis in and out year round. And it certainly doesn't show the data that most recently that people have moved out here and made this their primary residence and the impact that that's had on us. But just with the raw data, helicopter traffic in that top red bar, you can see the significant increase in the volumes. The land-based planes, that dark blue section, 10,000 operations in a 3-month period. And then the seaplanes growing at a higher percentage, but still a lower portion of the overall traffic. And moving on to page 7, this shows the hours of the day of operation. So you can see they can start early on, as early as 5 a.m. over my home on some mornings. They continue then through that peak rush hour period between 7 and 8. You see it go up, and then all day long it goes on. This chart calls out those extended hours that under the curfews had been limited, but since the curfews have been eliminated, we get that kind of traffic at all hours, day and night. Unfortunate dynamic for those of us who like to enjoy our homes and our yards after work for an evening barbecue or to have friends over. You can see that the peak comes right at that 5 p.m., 6 p.m., 7 p.m. It starts to subside a little bit. But just as your kids are coming home from school or going out in the backyard to play with friends, that's where you see those peak hours coming in, unfortunately, causing a great deal of disturbance over our homes. Page 8, please. Page 8 again shows you the operations data, meaning flights in and out data from that 2015 to 2019 3-month snapshot, which just shows the absolute volumes in a little bit of a spreadsheet version. But the grand total tells the story there. 15,620 operations over that 3-month period back in 2015 to the latest observation period being 2019, where we've now grown to over 19,000 flights in and out of the airport over our homes here on the east end of the town of Southampton. So I'm not sure if you've seen this data. I think many of us who live under the flight paths were pleased to see that the town of East Hampton went to this effort to disclose this. I think many of us are now kind of shocked that the volumes have gotten this high. But on a personal note, I certainly look forward to this board's help in trying to solve this serious problem for your neighbors here on the east end of the town of Southampton. With that, I'm going to turn it over to my friend Ron Klausner, who's going to show you now what that has done to the complaints. So this is the operations. These operations drive complaints, and Ron will take you through the trend on those. So Ron.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Jay, and Town Council members. First, though, I'd like to point out that we are the Aircraft Advisory Committee. We deal with all aspects of aircraft, not just noise abatement. And this is a critical distinction that should be recognized by everybody. So now I'm going to talk about the complaints by residents of the town of Southampton that have been received by the town of East Hampton as reported by the consulting firm HMMH. On slide 9, the reporting systems utilized were PlaneNoise, AirNoise.io, and AirNoise Report. On slide 9, it shows PlaneNoise, the original way to send a complaint. That required filling out a detailed form each time you notice some aircraft over your head. Slide 10, AirNoise.io, which became integrated into the PlaneNoise system in July 19, requires only just pushing a single button to register a complaint. You hear something above you, you either have a button or you go onto your phone, push one click, and you make your complaint. It recognizes the aircraft. Slide 11, AirNoise Report, which has been operational since June 2016, works by touching an image of the aircraft on a map. Now go to slide 12, please. Let's notice the increase in complaints in the 1 year 2019 compared to 2018. Overall, complaints increased by 33%. That's almost 12,000 complaints. And complaints about the noisiest aircraft, which are helicopters, increased by 31%. It's almost 12,000 complaints. And seaplanes, which are also very noisy, increased by 97%, which translates into about 4,000 complaints. The next slide, slide 13, compares the number of complaints between 2015 and 2019. Overall, complaints increased over that 5-year period by almost 145%. That's 28,000 complaints over the 5-year period, the difference. The noisiest aircraft, helicopters, increased by 122%. That's 14,000 complaints almost. And seaplanes increased by 435%. That's almost 7,000 complaints. Understand that seaplanes not only can land on our bays, but they also land on the airport itself. Slide 14 shows the same information, but in a bar chart year after year. Let's go to slide 15, which shows all the complaints during the summer of 2019 on a heat map. The line approximates the boundary between Southampton and East Hampton. I'd like everybody to notice that the concentration of complaints are in the town of Southampton, especially the hamlets of Northsea, Noyak, Sag Harbor, Watermill, and Bridgehampton. Almost 47,000 complaints in total. 47,000. Let's let that number sink in. That's for July through September 2019. 47,000. Let's go to the next slide. Slide 16, please. It shows the same period last year, but only the helicopter complaints, which made up more than half of the total complaints. Almost 25,000 complaints in only 3 months. And we expect this number to increase as a result of the COVID pandemic. We all know there's been an exodus from New York City to the Hamptons, and many more homeowners are staying here past Labor Day. A commercial helicopter company recognized that trend and has begun to offer a new model for those commuting to the city during the week. According to a recent news article, it has started this program where for $965 a month, residents may commute by helicopter or seaplane from East Hampton Airport an unlimited number of times, 7 days a week, for just $295 a trip. They allege that it takes a half an hour to go by helicopter or seaplane where it would otherwise take 4 hours. According to that article, the company sold over 120 passes for September within the first 24 hours. Now, we will not only have to endure weekend traffic from and to New York City, but weekday commuters as well, blanketing our skies. You better get your headphones ready. I certainly have mine. The next slide, please. This is a map created by the Eastern Regional Helicopter Association, a trade organization, which shows the new helicopter routes recommended by them starting in 2020. As mentioned, East Hampton Airport is a landlocked airport. It may be accessed by either the ocean to the south or the Long Island Sound from the north. For the ocean southern route, helicopters are now directed to go over Shinnecock Canal, cross the bay, and then cut across Noyac, North Sea, Sag Harbor, Watermill, Bridgehampton, and Sagaponack. Complaints have already begun to come in from Hampton Bays, Shinnecock Nation, and Shinnecock Hills, in addition to the old standbys. Helicopters from the northern sound route are now directed to go out past Orient Point and then head back west to East Hampton Airport instead of crossing over the North Fork. This adds significant time and distance to traffic taking the northern route. Obviously, more helicopters will choose the southern ocean route as it will save them gas and time, even though it will cause even more distress to residents of Southampton. Finally, if you look at that map, look at the designation which says noise-sensitive areas to avoid. How do these areas get to be deemed noise-sensitive? Why aren't certain areas of Southampton under that new ocean route noise-sensitive? How does a trade organization get to make that determination? Believe you, my ears are just as sensitive as anyone's ears who live in a noise-sensitive area. In conclusion, we are facing more and more traffic to and from East Hampton Airport, especially from the noisiest aircraft, helicopters, and seaplanes. We are facing more and more complaints from residents of Southampton. We will be facing more and more complaints from additional areas of Southampton because of the new helicopter routes. The registered complaints are only the tip of the iceberg. Anecdotally, many residents have been complaining for years without any result. They're tired. They've given up. They have seen no change, only an increasing number of flights over their homes. Aircraft adversely affect the quality of life in Southampton. 1, pollution, noise pollution, air pollution, and water pollution. 2, safety. We all hear stories of aircraft crashes. Odds are one day an accident will cause life and or property damage here in Southampton. 3, property values. With pollution and safety concerns, the values of our homes underneath the superhighway in the sky are and will continue to be adversely affected. That's not right. Today, we appreciate the opportunity to come before you and set forth the problem. Tomorrow, we hope to work together to seek solutions. Thank you.
All right,
Thank you. And I want to thank John Corain as well for presenting. And I would like to open it up to the board if you have any questions or comments about this presentation or our situation. We know that this raises more questions than it answers.
To run, so those routes you just showed, the November route versus some of the other routes, have we seen a decrease in complaints on the North Fork? Are those routes being followed, or are they not being followed? Are they actually going around Orient Point now, or not?
Yes, we noticed some going around the North Fork. There is no official count yet from HMMH, but we have been receiving complaints, as I said, from those areas of Hampton Bay, Shinnecock Nation, and Shinnecock Hills. But we can't speak about North Fork.
Or some of them,
Jay,
or
Jay,
some,
we would like to come back to the board in the fall and, do some more evaluation on this to get some of that information with some time, under our belts to report that back to the board.
it seems like the route that goes over the least number of homes is that November route, the one that goes over Georgica Pond
Yes, that's the,
being
Yes.
used? Or
That's
not?
the Sierra route.
Oh, that's the Sierra route? Okay.
Sierra comes up over Georgica, but what we see is that they kind of cut the corner and they go over Bridgehampton and the eastern portion of Watermill rather than going south east over Georgica Pond. Of course, these routes are all determined by the pilots, and safety trumps everything, and so they can set the courses as they need, but they do need to follow the tower at East Hampton for arrival and departure routes.
Okay. Is
So,
there?
Yeah, I have a question. And this is really, just watching these numbers increase over time is just a little mind-boggling to me, and I share your concerns, Ron, about it. We've had this issue for a long time, and sometimes I personally felt at a loss as to what to do. If you're going to have another session and bring this back, I would suggest, and I know you've probably done this before, but at least it'll give us some information, that we have some federal authorities here, and we have some of the trade group members here. We have those organizations as part of that working group to speak with. And, their refusal to meet will tell us something. Their willingness to talk and give us the information that we need to have to make more informed decisions, particularly in trying to establish more sensitive areas in the town of Southampton in particular. That's a striking change from the last presentation that we had 2 years ago, as a change, as a result of those changes in the flight routes. So that's something I would just throw out to you guys. I think it's important that we hear from people who have the authority to make the changes that are necessary, or at least help us make informed decisions as to how to do that.
Can I go back to either John or Ron too? I just wasn't quite done.
I'm sorry, Jake. I didn't realize.
No, that's okay, John. So I know that, East Hampton had attempted to impose some restrictions on types of aircrafts or times of day or frequency of travel. There was an issue with having to do a noise study. They were going to do some sort of noise study with the hopes that they would then be able to get the ability to establish some reasonable curfews. What is the status of that? Do we know?
I can give you a perspective. This is John, Jay. The town that Part 161, as it's called, based on my understanding, I think they put that on hold. The grant assurances that the town of East Hampton took when they took the money from the FAA back in, I believe it was 2001, had a 20-year life to them. And then they will expire in October of 2021, which is why this has become a very hot topic in the town of East Hampton and with Peter and the board there. Jeff Bragman is the liaison to their Airport Management Advisory Committee, and they've been very gracious in inviting some of us to attend those meetings and weigh in. So I'm imagining this gets broadcast at some point, and some of the elected officials in the town of East Hampton may watch it, and I just want to extend my thanks to them for being so open and listening to our concerns. I don't know how they are going to proceed. The term that's been used is re-envisioning the airport. You may be familiar with it. It's over 600 acres of town-owned land. It's over the largest aquifer on the South Fork that we all are dependent upon for our fresh water. And because the water supply does not know any town boundaries, if it gets polluted there, it affects us as well on this side of the town line. So I know that there's a lot of good work going on that side, and I think what Tommy John referenced in terms of our desire to come back to this board and keep you updated, we're learning as we go as well. And I think the good news is that our neighbors to the east in the town of East Hampton are trying to figure out this problem, and they appreciate that we're suffering from it, and they know the town of Southold residents and the town of Riverhead residents and Shelter Island residents are all affected by their airport. So I hope that gives you a little bit of a flavor for it, Jay, but the timing I think is very right for us to get involved in this on the town of Southampton side, to weigh in and help them with their decisioning.
Do you have some specific recommendations for the town board in terms of actions that we can take other than, the normal advocacy role that we play?
At this point, I don't think I'm in a position to say anything yet. I think it's probably public knowledge that there's a spectrum of options that's going to be available to East Hampton town. And I think at one end of the spectrum, you have a group of people who would like to say that the only solution long-term is going to be repurposing that property for something other than an airport. And I think then there's various community voices that want to try something that will say, let's get rid of the helicopters, let's get rid of the seaplanes, let's limit the hours of operation for local flyers. Historically, the problem with that has been that because of the courts and the FAA rulings, this appears to be coming down to a binary decision. It's either opened or it's closed. And I think this is what the town of East Hampton is grappling with, to see is there some middle ground. And I don't have the insights to that. I think that the board is trying to wrap their heads around that.
And to that point, one of the things that we would like to do as an advisory committee to this town board is to bring you as much information as possible about this, so that the Southampton town board is fully aware and fully knowledgeable of this issue, to the constituents of Southampton.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I want to go back to Ron's complaint data and the flight data for one moment, and then I know you've got a lot of other important business to attend to. The primary victims of the airport are town of Southampton residents. And the good thing about Peter and Jeff and the board members on the town of East Hampton is they know it. They know that we are more impacted by this than their residents who, from a distribution perspective, live east of the airport. So the people west of the airport suffer because of the flight patterns that come in and out of Manhattan. So again, I don't think this is the appropriate time. I think we should have a few more sessions before we all try to come to a conclusion in terms of what should be the town of Southampton's official position on the improvements that are necessary to make our quality of life better here on the East End, and, from a parochial perspective, the resident taxpayers of the town of Southampton.
John, I appreciate what you're saying, and I think some of the information that I would like to see you bring forward. There's been this sort of constant, almost a sense of adversarialness, in that if the East Hampton airports are closed, the people in the West, particularly the Gabreski Airport, are concerned that it simply shifts the problem farther west and just creates another problem as well. I've never seen data that would show what would be the consequences of all the options that you had spoken about East Hampton. And I would really hate to get into a position where it becomes adversarial east and west. We're all in this together, and
I agree.
I don't want to see that emerge out of these conversations.
Okay, John, and I think we'll do our best to try to provide that information, and I agree with you 100%. We can't have this be a a battle of East and West within our own community. It's probably not too different from the battle that is happening on the East Hampton side as well, because they have an airport in Montauk. And I'm sure they're grappling with that challenge of, okay, if they don't land at East Hampton Airport, does that mean they're going to go to Montauk and land those noisy helicopters? I think we'll be able to show you that that is not a likely scenario, just because of having to travel either east or west on those time periods. If you had to land at West Hampton and then get out to your place at Georgica, probably wouldn't be all that appealing on a with the traffic situation out here.
Totally agree, and I think that's it's those issues that are seemingly unrelated that in fact we should conflate with all of this, and that's the impact of traffic headed east as well as west. So I agree with that entirely. I think there's a broader view to take here as well. So I appreciate your sentiments and your.
Well, thank you very much for your question. That puts us on a to-do list for us.
And there's another variable in this, Julius, if I could, is that the change in the November route, the arrival route, instead of going over the North Fork, now goes over portions of the western part of the town. And that is a new aspect of the situation.
Mm-hmm.
And
Tommy John, maybe at our next meeting, we could even talk about the Schumer proposal and that whole North Shore route. Get into the board a little bit about the history of that, where we think it is today. Will it help us? Will it hurt us? Clearly our neighbors on the North Fork have had a great deal of influence when it comes to these routes.
Just one more question, John. The one thing that we've noticed here is that we're seeing more military aircraft out of Kabreski, and I'm wondering if those change in routes are actually shifting their training exercises west. We're seeing a lot of heavy military aircraft and operating at much lower altitudes than I ever recall. And I'm wondering if that's because of they're trying to avoid that traffic that you've described so well here, and it's moved their operation westward. So it might be a question or something to involve the air group there.
I can reach out, John. I can reach out to the manager down at Kabreski and see if he can provide us with some stats on that. Has it had an impact? Tommy John, I think we can. I think I'm drawing a blank right now on the gentleman's name, but he's been very helpful. Thank you, Jay. Yep. Yeah, Tony's. I don't know him personally, but I know he's been very helpful to people trying to figure out this situation.
I think it's important that if they have a priority here, and if their priorities are being impacted and they're trying to work with these flight route changes, that there's some leverage there in moving some of those routes or having a federal agency, in this case the rescue wing, having an input to where it's important to keep traffic out of as well.
Thank you.
Julie?
Thank you. So I have a request. Is there any way, or is there slides available now that show the old and new routes with an overlay of actual flight paths? I know that you have the complaints on there, but I'm looking for actual flight paths. And just one other quick thing. I tried to watch the link to the East Hampton video, and it wasn't working for me. I don't know if it was me, but if somebody could resend that, that would be great.
Okay. It's on YouTube, and it starts at we're in, and we will.
It kept stopping, and I couldn't get it to work. So maybe at work I can watch it.
Okay, but, it's a good data point. We certainly can get the flight paths in and out, and we could do it on a time, whether it's 3 months or a year. Okay.
Right. I'd like to see the old flight paths versus the new. What they're actually doing, which is always at the discretion of the pilot, which is taking a shortcut.
I'm sure.
Yeah, my question on that, Julie, and I think that's a good idea, but helicopters don't have to file flight plans. So do you guys have that information, the tracking based on your complaint data that you can see the routes that they're generally following as a result of that complaint data?
Let us work on this and come back to you all in the fall. And, you know, we are, we're putting together data and information for this board. So right now, we do not believe it does exist.
All right, great. Thank you.
I've seen similar maps, so I'm thinking that it does.
Well, I want to thank all of you, Tommy John in particular, for bringing this to our attention, and also to Ron and John. This obviously is a major disturbance to the quality of life for thousands of our residents, if not all of our residents. And, you know, I have a good relationship with the board over there in East Hampton. I know they want to be good neighbors. This clearly is impacting the town of Southampton more than the town of East Hampton. Part of this may be their own, you know, policies in terms of how they are asking traffic to be routed, which largely takes it over our territory. But, you know, I look forward to a continued conversation and hopefully some relief at some point, some sort of action that will lessen the constant disturbance that so many people have been enduring for so long. So thank you for being available today to make this presentation.
Thank you, Jay.
All right, we're going to move on in the agenda. So we have next up is the Reassessment Advisory Committee recommendations. And hopefully Lisa Gorey is on the line and Joe Savio is on the line. I see some phone numbers. I'd have to see which, if either one of them are Joe's number. Oh, I see Joe's there. Charles, you want to let these people, let those individuals in?
I am here.
Lisa, I don't see you. Are you going to be visible?
I am here. For some reason, I don't know why, on this laptop. There's a webcam, but when I'm on Zoom on this laptop, the camera, it says it doesn't detect the camera. So I don't know what the issue is. But I am here.
Who else is on that's been involved? Is Jim Burke involved on the meeting, or anyone for the town attorney's office?
No, I don't believe so.
I know Sean hasn't really been involved in this particular committee. Let me just introduce this real quick, and then I'll turn it over to Lisa. So I guess about a year ago, roughly a year ago, maybe a little bit less, we made a decision as a board to take a hard look at our assessment practices, policies, and practices. We put a 2-year freeze on what we call market trend assessments, where we were, you know, otherwise going through everybody's property values and adjusting it for changes in the market, be it upward or downward, and trying to keep our assessment rolls current so that everybody was paying their fair share of taxes based on, you know, their percentage of value versus the town as a whole. And a committee was put together with our sole assessor at the helm to work with the committee to try to look at whether our system, you know, is the right system for the town, whether there are unanticipated problems with it, and could we make it better? What direction should we take? Joe Savio is one of the people on that committee. He's present at this meeting. He's a licensed real estate broker throughout the East End, largely concentrated in the Hampton Bays area. And of course, our sole assessor you're all familiar with. And this group has been meeting pretty much, I guess, on a monthly basis, though during the pandemic, maybe a little bit less. So Lisa, can I turn it over to you to take it from here?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
So as the supervisor mentioned, we have been meeting regularly, probably since about last year around September, October. And our most recent meeting, we had a Zoom meeting the end of July, and we wanted to make a decision on some of the ideas that we had come up with in the committee regarding the impact of the reassessments on our year-round residents and citizens. So a number of people that we had on the committee, we had a former assessor from the town of Brookhaven. He had actually introduced what's called a Save Our Homes cap, which is an increase, a cap on the taxable value of the assessment. So technically, your assessment could increase, say by 10–20%. However, we would cap the amount of the assessed value that would be considered taxable. So that was one of the ideas that we had discussed. And then another idea that we had come up was an exemption similar to that of the star exemption, where you would receive an increase in your assessment based on the market trend. However, you would be able to apply for the exemption, which would have to be, we did have a meeting with Fred Thiel back in November to discuss this exemption idea with him, because it would have to, have some type of legislation drafted and then approved. So I had drafted a letter back in, I think it was February, to Fred Thiel. And then, of course, COVID started. So that's kind of where we left off. So in the meeting the Zoom meeting that we had in July, we just wanted to, kind of decide which way we were going to go with the exemption and the cap. So the general consensus was that most of the majority of the members who attended that Zoom meeting in July were in agreement with the exemption, and the amount would be a $50,000 exemption and a 5% cap on the taxable value increase in the assessment. So that's where we are right now. I did send all of the town board members a spreadsheet of the exemption impact. I was hoping to share that with you on my screen. I don't even want to attempt to do that because I don't want to inadvertently leave the Zoom meeting. So I'm not even going to attempt to try to bring it up on my screen. But you should have it in front of you. And what it basically shows is that, I have someone from IT's here. They're going to try to mess with my screen. But if you have the spreadsheet in front of you, this is based on a 50,000 exemption. So, can you see it on your screen there?
Yes. Yeah. And I have it.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Tara. All right. So you'll see the first example. What I did was I broke it down by school district, because everyone knows that has the greatest impact on the real estate taxes. So you'll see in Eastport, South Manor School District, there are a total number of 340 recipients that currently have the star exemption, either a basic star or a star enhanced. There are a total of 777 people or properties in that school district. So the number of people that would make up that exemption is about 44%. The amount needed to be collected in taxes in 2019, this is the 2019 in tax information. So excuse me. It was about, their tax levy there is 5,432,000. And then their current taxable value was 276 million. So someone with an average assessed value of say $500,000 with the current tax rate in that school district was about $19.67. Their taxes without any exemptions was about $9,800. Now, if we were to grant someone a $50,000 exemption, if we were to grant all 340 properties a $50,000 exemption, the taxable value in that school district is going to, of course, decrease because we're removing the value from their assessment. So their tax rate would increase, would go up to about $21.22. So with someone not having that $50,000 exemption, if they did not qualify, their taxes would go from about $9,800 to $10,613. So about a $775 increase. Now, if someone in that school district qualified for the exemption, their tax of $9,800 is now going to go down to about $9,500. So that would be the impact on someone in the Eastport school district. Now, with this legislation, I believe.
So just Lisa, so if you were in Eastport, South.
Go ahead, Jay, you were going to.
Yeah, if you were in Eastport, South Manor, just to finish what you were saying, and you were a year-round resident, so you qualified for the STAR, so you would save what, $286. That's your last
right.
time. But
right.
if you were not a year-round resident, you'd actually pay $775 more. And that's a lot in that school district. There's a lot of year-round residents and not as many seasonal residents.
That's correct. In Eastport School District, yes.
Okay.
So the rest of the school districts actually follow that same example. Now, with this legislation, I would have to talk more, to Fred Thiel about this. I don't know whether or not we could write the legislation that would have the schools automatically opt into this, or if they would have to actually pass some type of resolution opting into it. So that's, that's kind of where we're at with this exemption.
So can you just go through some of these, like the areas, are more populated areas like Hampton Bays, East Quad?
So we could take, yeah, so we could take Hampton Bays. You see total of just over 2,000 STAR recipients in that school district out of about 7,100 properties. So someone with an average assessment of 500,000, their current taxes, their school taxes are just under $7,000. So if we were to pass legislation for the exemption, someone not qualifying for the exemption would see an increase of about $223. So their taxes would go from just under $7,000 to $6,300. Well, excuse me, let me back that up. Their current taxes are $6,096, so just over $6,000. Their taxes would go to about $6,300 if they did not qualify for the exemption. And if they did qualify for the exemption, then they would see a decrease in their school taxes. Their taxes would go from the $6,000 down to about $5,600, maybe a little more.
So that's what
It's about a $400 savings in that school district for someone who would qualify for that exemption with a $500,000 assessment.
Right, and then there would be also savings in other tax law, assuming the town tax is maybe 20% of the bill, so, and the school tax 70 to 80%.
Yes, so someone with the town taxes, you know, the rate's fairly low, so they're seeing a savings of about $18 in their just the town general taxes.
Okay, so all right, so that's a fair $400 is fairly significant
So
yearly.
the biggest impact would be the schools.
Right, and then East Quogue, the average year-round resident is like a $378 savings on their school tax.
Right, their current taxes are about $5,100. Right.
So that basically that last column, and then you just match it with the area, and you can see what somebody qualifying. This has nothing to do with the cap. This has only to do with the $50,000 value reduction.
Right. This has nothing to do with the cap. That's something totally different.
And the spreadsheet that we are looking at right now only pertains to the tax on the
Only
school
pertains
district,
to the exemption.
as it applies to the individual school districts, not the fire districts, library districts, or the town. Is that
That's correct. Right. It would be different for those other districts. Right.
And
I wanted to show the school
not
district
sure-
because they have the biggest impact.
Do we need enabling legislation from the state to do something like this?
Yes.
And then the question that you have, Lisa, for Fred and Ken Laval, I suppose, is that whether or not the individual school districts would want to opt in or not, or whether they can be required to.
Correct.
Okay.
I mean,
To participate, yeah.
I mean, clearly is a shifting of the tax burden away from your homesteads, your year-round residents, which I think that's a policy decision. Should we want to go down that road? But it is done in some other places. Florida and other places have homestead type of exemption. So the state would have to create it, whether it's just for the town of Southampton or if it's something that is available on a statewide basis. That's something that we would discuss with Assemblyman Thiel. But we could not do this without that enabling legislation from Albany.
And how would homesteading be established? I guess that's probably a question for another time, but
These numbers were based on if you qualify for the STAR, not the enhanced STAR, but the basic STAR.
Right.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Well, we would have to do the exemption for those that qualify for both the basic STAR and the enhanced STAR, because the enhanced STAR is for our residents that are 65 and older, so we would definitely want to include them. So the total number of STAR in each one of these school districts includes both the basic and the enhanced STAR. And we would want to mirror the requirements to qualify for this exemption similar to that of the STAR. It would have to be their primary residence. They would, have to apply for we would follow all of the same requirements. They would have to apply by the taxable status deadline date.
Right.
So Lisa, this is John Bouvier. I have a question for you relative to the Eastport South Manor School District and the fact that it's kind of an unusual situation. It's the portion of their school tax is upwards of 80, not close to 90% in some cases. That's the portion of the school tax, because they're sending their children to a school that's in another municipality. Does this, what you're proposing, have an unfair impact on that unique situation that we have in the town?
Are you saying, will it have a unfair?
Yeah.
And just to clarify, you're talking about an unfair impact on the seasonal residents of the Eastport South Manor School District? Is that what you're asking?
Yep, that's my question.
Well, based on the spreadsheet that you have in front of you, you see that those who are not year-round residents, they could potentially see an increase of about, $700. So, if you want to say that that's unfair, I guess, that the answer would be yes. But, for our year-round residents, which is why I believe the committee was formed, so that we could try to lessen the tax impact on those who are here year-round and simply do nothing to their homes, but are affected greatly by the market trend. So if it's an unfair advantage to those, then maybe it is, but.
No, well, I didn't mean to use the word unfair. I meant
okay.
that across the board, that there are no areas as a result of what you guys are proposing that are disproportionately affected as a result of being in a unique situation. I mean, when I look at the numbers, I don't see that. I just, want you to be able to confirm that. I mean, I think I'm seeing it. Just clarify if I'm not seeing this. I don't think I see what I'm suggesting, but I do see a much higher tax rate or tax burden on some of the Eastport Manor, the Eastport area residents because of that unique situation from the school district side. So they're already being impacted by that situation. I don't know how many year residents we have. Right now, the situation that we're in, where we have people that are moving here and enrolling their kids in schools because of the pandemic, the impact of that is similar in some ways. So I just want to be sure that that you guys looked at this from east to west and west to east to be sure that there was nothing that was unique or an unforeseen consequence that was created as a result of it.
So
Well,
John,
we have a similar situation with our Flanders, Riverside, and Northampton kids who go to Riverhead.
right.
Correct.
So yes,
as well as Sag Harbor.
Right.
right. So like an area like Flanders, Riverside, you're seeing this, for the year-round folks, it's a significant reduction, $320 a year. Wherever there is not a lot of second homes, if you have an area like Eastport, South Manor, where you don't have that many as a percentage of the number of homes, you're going to see that larger number jump. So for those individuals, because there's so few of them. So that's where you see that 775 number, and Flanders, Riverside, 334 number. These are for the vacation home properties. So yeah, it definitely is a jump for those.
That issue concerns me with this is if we, in some of our communities that don't have a lot of summer homes, and they do get an exemption and qualify for the exemption, I don't know what is to stop a school district that is, for lack of a better word, losing revenue just to raise their tax rate in the next fiscal year. And that is, of course, up to them, but I just see that as a possible scenario here.
So if I could just go back for a second and say, so this is one of the recommendations of the committee. There were two principal recommendations. One is basically everyone who's here year-round would get $50,000. So if you had a $5 million home, it's not much of a reduction in your overall value versus if you have a $500,000 home. Then it's a 10% reduction versus a 1% reduction. But it is, everybody would get that $50,000, and that would help those with the lowest value house. So if you have a home assessed at $300,000 or $400,000, it becomes relatively significant, that $50,000 reduction. The second piece was this cap, that we would continue the market trend. If your property went up by 10% or 20%, like this year, we're seeing the biggest jump I think we've ever seen in property values. If your value went up by 20%, we would note that. We would record that as the new value but we wouldn't base your taxation on that new value. We would limit the increase to 5% in a given year unless the property transfer. So if you sold the property, the new person acquiring the property they would be coming in at the value reflected on the tax rolls, the true value, not at the reduced value that the homeowner was able to receive based on that cap. So that would be understood. So those were the two recommendations. The committee felt that not that we should abandon the market trend. And we analyzed that, but felt that there were many actually beneficial aspects to the market trend itself. That it was basically the fairest way to assess, and that if we would walk away from market trend, 20 years from now, things would be completely out of whack, and people with much more valuable properties would be paying less than people with less valuable properties. And that for the most part, the growth in valuation has been in higher valued areas. So it's the estate properties that have been going up faster than the working class areas. And that working class people basically have been benefiting more than they may have realized from this market trend approach. So maybe their areas were going up at 5% a year, while the estate areas were going up at 10% to 20%. And so those areas were picking up year by year a bigger and bigger piece of the pie of the cost of running the town. So the committee ultimately found that we should try to keep market trend. We at some point should unfreeze and go back to market trend, but hopefully with these protections in place. Now, we did put a 2-year freeze on market trend. Would we be able to get these protective measures, mitigating measures in place within those 2 years? I really don't know. We could, as a board, if the board agrees that these are the right things to accept the recommendations of the committee, we could then either lift the cap or leave it in place for the 2 years that we said, with the hopes that Albany would give us these tools. So we would make a formal request as a board for Assemblyman Thiel and our state senator, Ken LaValle at the moment, to carry legislation to create these mechanisms. If we're unsuccessful in getting it, after that 2-year period, we'll have that difficult decision either to try to extend the freeze or to lift it. I would caution the board against extending it beyond 2 years for a number of reasons, but the primary reason is things are gonna start to get really out of whack. And
Right.
there'll be no pathway back. So it's already getting out of whack because of this surge in property values that we're currently seeing. Again, primarily in estate properties, but I think, and Joe could attest to this, I think across the board, property values are jumping with the pandemic. It may adjust back when the pandemic is over. We may see these property values diminish. But at the moment, and Lisa can talk to this as well, it's a significant increase right now in valuations. I don't think anything's gone down in this pandemic. Some things have gone up, 25, 30, probably more %. Joe or Lisa, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll speak to the market and the conditions that, that I'm seeing, especially, Hampton Bays and that proper area there for more of the middle income families. Seeing that there's an influx of money coming in from Manhattan, and the majority of it seems to be cash monies that are coming in, and they're basically outbidding or bidding with each other, against each other, for the limited amount of inventory that we currently have, and the prices are appreciating at a much more rapid rate than I'm going to say I've seen in the past 20 years or so doing this. So I think the mechanisms that we're putting in place, because of the situation that we're currently having, I think that will really help those that are here year round, that have been here and have been paying taxes and are not enjoying selling their house right now and enjoying that appreciation in value and then leaving. So I think that mechanism, or the mechanisms that we have, are really going to help our people as a whole. And then, you know, we do the market appreciation, which we're going to have to release at some point, the freeze, so that we do get some more, I guess, equalization to the values and the assessments. That will help us, I think, overall, but having those limitations or caps will certainly help those that are currently here. So that's pretty much what I'm seeing right now.
Mhm.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and
Make a comment? So
yes,
just
Julie.
what Jay said and what Joe had said about bidding wars and living in estate areas. That's what concerns me. You know, I don't live in an estate area, but if the 4 people on each side of me happen to buy out those properties in their bidding war, then I shouldn't be negatively impacted because I'm just living here and trying to get by working 6 different jobs. So I think that this will be helpful, and thank you all for taking the time to try to help our residents who, you know, just want to live here like they have forever.
Thank you, Lisa. And, you know, we struggled on what percentage cap, you know, because, you know, we talked about a 3% cap in valuation. If your properties start to go up, like a property like yours, Julie, you know, should we be 2% cap, 3%? We ultimately agreed to 5%. You know, we have seen appreciation some years at 10%, some years nothing at all, with the hope that at 5%, it could stay close to that value so that when a property sells, it's not an enormous jump in taxes for that property. But, you know, we felt 5% was the right number, that most people could probably absorb that. But it's, you know, we have seen in the tax rolls sometimes, and Lisa can attest to this, areas where when we catch up, they've been adjusted in a single year 50% or more in what their valuation is, which likely means their taxes, you know, depending on the tax rate, but may go up by 50% in 1 year. That's too big of a jump. It's too big of a jump. So 5% would be the maximum jump then. There's no cap on the downside. No, if it goes down 10% in a year, we're not saying we'll only tax it at a 5% decrease. That's only on the upside. Correct, Lisa?
That's correct. Yeah. And I just want to mention also, you know, we don't want to wait too long if we are going to continue with reassessments, because in 2019, that was the last, you know, reassessment that we did, but we had been maintaining 100% all along. So now to have this freeze and then to unfreeze it, like Jay said, we may see, you know, a huge jump. And those areas like Flanders, Hampton Bays in 2019, they saw an increase of 10, 15%. Well, those areas are still increasing now. So we definitely don't want those areas, you know, Hampton Bays, Flanders, East Quogue, to see a 30, 40% jump in another 2 years. So that's what we want to avoid. And we are in the first year of our freeze. If we continue with the reassessment, our next reassessment, according to our state work plan, is to occur in 2022. That planning for that reassessment is going to have to begin in the spring, no later than the spring of 2021. So we definitely have some decisions to make.
Lisa, I have a couple of questions for you. Our neighboring towns, East Hampton and Brookhaven Town, they use a multiplier for their assessment process. Is that correct?
They equalize their assessments. Yes.
Okay. It's an equation where there's a base number and then.
Yes. The state actually provides them with their equalization rates. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it comes from the state based on what their level of assessment.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And we use market trend. Did the committee evaluate the effect of our policy of using market trend and our school district's ability to acquire state aid? I'm looking at some of the numbers that are provided, and I know the state aid numbers throughout Long Island, and in the town of Southampton, well, I believe that our state aid numbers are lower than where they should be, but that's just, what I think here. And I was wondering, to what extent does our market trend of policy of this municipality affect the school district's ability to acquire state aid? And I think that's really where the real crux of our tax issue is. And if our schools could get more state aid, then we can see some greater relief than what we're trying for now in some areas of the town.
Mm-hmm.
Did we look at the effect of the market trend?
We did not look at the impact of the, we didn't look at the impact of state aid on school districts. We mostly focused on, assessments in the school districts. I think that would probably even be more of a question for one of our representatives in the state from a real property office regarding state aid for the school districts and whether or not each of the districts are receiving their fair share. I know for the school districts that we are like Brookhaven, and Eastport South Manor, we are in a split school district with both, Riverhead. But I believe they receive more of state aid for the Southampton town side than they do on the Easthampton, the Eastport and the Brookhaven side, because like you mentioned, they do have an equalization rate that is applied to their assessments, where Southampton is not.
And we don't get an equalization because we're at, or at least in the past, we were at 100% market trend, where other municipalities get a number assigned to them, and then school district, and there are a lot of other variables in this, and then the school state aid is determined by those. Okay.
And I have one more question, or I guess comment. In the past, we have talked about the assessment of the high-end homes. And I think that's going to be even more of an impact, especially with people from New York City relocating out here. I think that needs to be addressed, where we feel that we're under-assessing those high-value homes. And I think it will be helpful to the town tax intake if we are assessing them properly.
I agree, Julie. I mean, if you recall, a couple of years ago when we did the PowerPoint presentation to the town board, and we felt that we were still under assessing a lot of those higher end homes. And now with this bidding war going on, they're paying over the market value for these houses. And I attended a Zoom meeting a couple of weeks ago, and in just the range of, I believe it was mentioned, the 1 million or the 2 million to 4 million $4 million sales prices, those homes, the sales have actually increased over 200% in just that price range alone. So I think it's very important that, if we continue with the reassessment, we have to do it right. So that's why, we have to start within the next few months.
And we should be collecting our fair share of taxes on all homes, not just.
That's right. We want to make sure we take the burden off of our working force, our year-round residents, and we make sure that, we have equity throughout the town of Southampton, and that no one, has a greater burden placed on them.
So if I could say,
I agree with that very much, Julian and Lisa. The concern I think Julian brought up before that I have is that we're in a bubble right now, and it's hard to chase market valuation because the markets are just screaming fast and high, and it impacts people. In the short term, they gain equity in their house because their valuation goes up and they can borrow more, but in the long term, I think that this artificial inflation of price is going to drop off, and it's going to leave some of our local residents who had this tax increase, but also increase in equity and valuation of the property. It's going to drop back, and I'm not sure how people get protected against that, because right now, I don't think what we're seeing here, at least in terms of market valuation, in determining our assessments on homes is really valid because of this craziness that's going on. And it's a search for housing. It's not a search for value. And I think that's gonna drop. So, you know, I just would caution that we need to also be aware, you know, that if we suddenly have a rapidly declining market for whatever reason, that our residents are protected against that, being as they've been assessed on market valuation, which I think in this case, in these next few months or year, is really an artificial number.
Right. So if you recall too, you know, part of the concern that led to the creation of this committee is we saw certain areas of the town going up very quickly, 20% a year, you know, some of these waterfront properties, but not everybody who lived in those areas actually were that affluent. A lot of them were on fixed incomes, retired people, and they couldn't, you know, they couldn't sustain large jumps in taxes. That we basically were forcing them to sell their homes, and we felt like we needed to take a pause and figure this out and figure out what mechanisms were needed if we're going to keep this market trend thing in place. And so this committee was put together. We did the assessment freeze. We've been meeting for the course of a year, and now the committee has made the recommendation. It's basically to keep the market trend in place, but to ask Albany to give us these stopgap measures, these protections that will cap how much a property can go up in a given year, and also provide some year-round relief to year-round working class people. So those are the two pieces here. And I'd like to actually ask the board to accept the recommendations, and we'll do this by resolution. We're not going to do it right now, of the committee, so that we can make a formal request to Albany for these tools. Then we would have, if we're able to, if Albany is able to pass this legislation, I'm sure there'll be a home rule resolution at some point that we're requested to pass. And then if this goes through, there'd be a separate resolution and a public hearing to adopt these measures. So right now is just basically to just ask for these things. And, you know, and what I would recommend is, although we could lift the 2-year freeze, I would say just let's leave it in place for the 2 years that we said. We'll go through one more year of this with the hopes that Albany will give us these tools in that period. And then after that, when that 2-year period sunsets, I would just be very cautious about extending it longer if Albany still hasn't acted, because of the fear of becoming very out of whack or disproportionate in our the way we tax people. So can we just do a quick go around maybe? I know Tommy John, you still have some concerns about market trend and school taxation. I don't know that that's that there is a disadvantage. There might actually be an advantage to being a full market when the equalization rates are applied. So, but I certainly understand that caution. We didn't, as a committee, study that issue. It is relevant in a sense that if we're going to keep the market trend system, we ought to know it's not disadvantaging the schools. So I think maybe some further study in that area. But at this juncture, I would like to ask the board to adopt, to accept these recommendations anyway of the committee. So
I have another question here, Jay, in that regard. That did the committee look at what happened should the market change in a rapid way? But more importantly, did the committee consider what might happen? And extrapolate it out over time, what might happen if Albany, considering what Albany and what the legislature is going to be faced with relative to the pandemic and legislation that's going to come forward. It's not just us, I'm quite sure. I'm sure there are many municipalities that, there's going to be a lot of legislation that's going to be proposed. And I'm not sure where this fits in the timing and the importance to local legislators, given some of the other critical pieces of legislation they're going to have to pass in light of the pandemic. So what happens if we do not get that? And that's important.
So I think if we are not given it because of the pandemic, we will have to make a decision as a board whether to continue the freeze or not. You know, to maybe go back to our old ways until Albany is prepared to give us this tool. And we can continue to request it. You know, these are broad policies, right? That we're looking to, you know, basically keep our full valuation system with certain protections in place and certain reliefs in place that go long after the pandemic is over. And, you know, I hope it's over as soon as possible. There's a vaccine, but we didn't look at the pandemic itself and its whether that would delay action in Albany at all. That wasn't something that we considered. We just figured what was the right thing to do, what is the right policy for the town. And the determination was the market trend system with these two measures was the best fit for the town of Southampton and its residents.
Hopefully the 2 years will give us enough time to get past
And
the pandemic.
And I was just going to say, if the town does, decide not to continue with reassessments because we don't have those two mechanisms in place, then the state will determine our equalization rate. So while the market continues to increase, or if it does start to decrease, and we remain at the freeze, that is when the state will step in and determine what our equalization rate is based on our level of assessment.
Right. So if just to kind of dumb it down a little bit, so if your house is worth $1 million, but it's on our tax rolls as $500,000, then the equalization rate is 2. It's just you multiply that $500,000 by 2 to get to the million. And so a lot like East Hampton, it might be a quarter of the true value. So you have to multiply it by 4. And that's kind of Tommy John was talking about, whether there's an advantage to that or not. Not that I'm aware of. But since East Hampton has never adjusted their property values in forever, 50 years, whatever it is, some areas have gone up much faster than others. So basically you have the values from 50 years ago still reflected, and you're not picking up the benefits to the areas that didn't go up as fast. They're paying just as much. So it's not particularly fair, but when I was East Hampton supervisor, this issue came up every single year, and nobody really wanted to touch it because it was so far out of whack that you just couldn't fix it without really very significant consequences, particularly on seniors who were in some of these houses that had gone up so much in value that they would be forced out of town. So, yeah, I don't want to see Southampton get into that situation where things are just very unfair in terms of taxation. But it's not uncommon in East Hampton to have a house that's worth significantly more than another house pay significantly less in town. Just give me a second to plug my computer in. All right, so what I'm asking, and I'm not asking for an official vote, but maybe a sort of a quick discussion. I would like to bring forth a resolution to formally adopt the committee's recommendations and then to request a legislation from Albany that would give us these tools. So that's what I'm asking for. Julie, are you okay with that?
I do support that. I would love to hear the information that Tommy John was looking for. If we can do a quick study on to see how that would impact the schools, but also did we think about, and I don't know if it's legal or not, a top limit for you to be able to get the $50,000 exemption? Like if your house is worth $10 million, do you really need an exemption, or is that just not being fair at all?
That 50,000 will have a minuscule effect on how much that property will will save in terms of taxes. It might be a 0.5% or something like that. Whereas somebody with $500,000 will save 10% on their taxes. So we felt that was the fairest way to do that. You're year-round, you're year-round.
Okay, I'm on board with moving ahead. I think that we need to help our year-round residents.
All right, Tommy John?
Yes, I'm on board. And I would like to take a look at something that I was asking earlier. And that is a situation that is not necessarily new with this committee. I believe that it is a situation that has existed in Southampton Town for many years.
All right, Rick, are you okay with these?
Yeah, definitely okay. I mean, I think we should keep the freeze in place. We had promised, the taxpayers that we would do that for a couple of years, and I would hate to pull that back now. But the homestead exemption is something that's important to our longtime residents. I think we definitely have to move ahead on that. And the cap at 5%, I've wavered on that, 3 or 5. I think some of the real inequities we have in the appraisals in town, there are causes sometimes for bigger jumps than that when we find we made mistakes. But that said, let's keep it equal and let's move ahead.
Yeah. Well, in terms of mistakes, like if the mistake was that we missed somebody's shed or garage, those that's still going to be changed. We're gonna capture those things. We'll still do our flyovers and things like that. So
right, we'll still capture the physical increases. It's just the market increase that would be capped at 5%. And then again, the cap is only it's a 10-year cap, and if you happen to have a 5% increase cap on your property, but then you turn around and sell it the following year, then that cap is then negated. It's removed, and you will be assessed whatever the market trend is. Sell your house for $1 million, but yet we only had you assessed at $800,000, and you have a cap. We're going to remove that cap, and your assessment will be reviewed accordingly.
But if somebody, let's say, put in a pool, and for some reason our tax rolls didn't catch that, and that increases the value by 10%, that's not limited to that 5%. They will go up that 10%.
That's correct. Right. That's considered a physical increase. We have the authority to capture that value.
So, but go back to Rick for a second. So are you okay with the 5% and the 50,000?
Yes.
Okay. John?
Yes, I am. I just want to be sure that there are protections in place going into the future that protects our current residents and our middle class here, so that we don't have, the whim of future boards can turn that around. I would just want to be sure that, this protects people over the long term, regardless of what the markets do. It's one of the problems that I have with full market valuation. Given these kinds of bubbles that occur, there's opportunities to exploit that, and I just want to protect our year-round residents from that. So in concept, I'm in agreement with what you're proposing.
All right. So thank you, John. So what I'll do is I'll get a resolution prepared. I'm not going to walk it on, I don't think, at the next meeting. I'll do it at the following meeting to accept these things. I mean, my biggest concern ahead will be if Albany doesn't give us these things when we reach the sunset of the 2-year freeze. We could cross that bridge when we get there, but there could be some significant impacts at that point. I want to thank, obviously, our sole assessor, Lisa Gorey, for chairing this committee and all the work. It's a significant amount of work that went into getting to this point. It may seem like 2 relatively simple solutions, but this committee worked extremely hard. We looked at different things all over the country and different tools and trying to come up with the best package for the town of Southampton. I want to thank Joe Savio, who's on our meeting, who was a really important member of this committee. And I want to thank the other members too, Sean Hattrick, James McLaughlin, James Ryan, Teresa Kiernan, our tax receiver, Len Marchese, our controller, Jim Burke, our town attorney, Rick Martell, who was also part of this committee, for their participation to get us to this point. It was really a significant amount of work. So, thank you, board, for hearing us out today. And I feel encouraged that the board is standing together and trying to tweak our system a little bit to make it a little fairer to our year-round and particularly working class residents. All right, thank you, Lisa and Joe. We're going to move on to the next item here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Bye-bye.
All right, so we are about a half an hour behind schedule. Do I still have Kristen and Tom Neely here? We're going to talk about parking regulations on beach waterway road ends. Charles, are they with us?
Yes, they're coming in.
They're coming in? Okay. All right, there's Kristen and is Tom. We're going to get the video from Tom too. Kristen, as you all know, is our Director of Parks. And Tom, when he comes on, Tom Neely is our Public Transportation and Traffic Safety Director. Tom, are you there? Kristen, can we check your audio?
Can you hear me?
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, I don't have video from Tom. Let me see what's happening.
Tom, do we have audio for you? I don't have audio either.
Sure, he's working on it.
So while you work on that, as you know, during this pandemic, we had some real serious issues with potential overcrowding at some of our recreational hotspots. These road ends that, you know, were always, I guess, popular on some level for beach access and for fishing, became inundated with people, particularly from areas where their beaches and surf fishing areas were closed. And they were finding these areas with unrestricted parking, and our police were having a hard time maintaining social distancing. And
Can you folks hear me now?
yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, Jay.
No, it's okay. So, by emergency order, executive order, I placed restrictions that were sort of broad brush sort of restrictions. So basically, any road end would be restricted to town resident only parking, period. Originally for 1,000 feet from the road end. I think that was then reduced to 500 feet to the road end. And those have been in place now for months and months and months. And I've asked various individuals to take a look at this, our police department, our parks department, public safety, to try to figure out, you know, obviously, excuse me, not all roads are the same. So what should be our policies? Do we want to continue these on a permanent basis or throughout the pandemic with certain restrictions? So with that, I guess I'm turning it over to you, Tom. Is that correct?
I've certainly been working very closely. We have a working group, maybe Councilman Martell and Councilwoman Lofstad would like to open it. We do have a short PowerPoint, but they've been doing a lot of heavy work on this. So.
Okay, great. So Rick or Julie, who wants to go next? Rick?
I'll start. So we did have a broad committee. We had Councilman Lofstad and myself, Tom. We had both the attorney's office, the Bay Constables, the trustees, and the police department all weighing in on some of the ramifications of what happened when the fishing season kicked in and the beaches were overcrowded, you know, the campers and people driving on the beach and the parking. So we decided to take a broader look moving forward on what we needed to do. We have some recommendations of extending the season, so on and so forth. But I think Tom's PowerPoint can get us started. So Tom, if you want to move ahead.
Well, let me give Julie an opportunity to. Julie, do you want to say anything at the beginning here?
Sure. Well, I wanted to thank everybody. This is such a complex issue. Every change that we do can affect parks or highway or the police department or Bay Constable. You can't really broad brush this. It's really a location by location specific. So we tried to prioritize some of the roads that we're talking about, the ones that we know that there were issues with in the past, but also understanding that if we change something somewhere, people may go somewhere else. We can't do it all at once. We're trying to do it in an appropriate manner going forward. So I just wanted to thank everybody. It's been, it was a lot of hard work, and I think it's going to continue to be a lot of hard work going forward to try to address all the issues.
Well, I think both our council people have given some nice summaries of what it's taken to get to this point. I do have this short PowerPoint to walk everybody through. And we did email these out yesterday, just so you have these documents, also hard copies if you want them. But today's work session is a follow-up to the work session we had on July 13th, where we first started talking about this. We've been reviewing the beach and water access, vehicle and traffic regulations. There's some discussion of the beach parking lots and the fishing piers as part of this, but most of it's been the on-the-road vehicle and traffic regulations. We did focus on key identified roads. Those were the roads that supervisors, you said there were a number that have specifically were kind of inundated to begin with, where emergency orders went into effect. There were some additional roads that came up, I think, in our discussion on July 13th, and there were a few more that were emailed to me or people called me about. Bay Constables, for example, gave us a little more input on some roads. So we've come up with, I think it's probably about 13 roads or so that we've been looking at. As far as the regulations, we've really been focusing on the parking by permit and the seasonal no parking regulations. And as I think one of our board members just said, we're looking at a lot of issues. Part of the discussions have been, are these problems that we've had going to continue forever? Or are they going to maybe go away, when the pandemic goes away? I will say, I think my sense, and I think maybe the sense of the group is these issues are probably not going to go away. And we can talk, more about that. We are looking to balance a variety of the considerations. Public safety, of course, is way up the top of the list. What the stakeholders want, the people that live on the streets, the residents, the people that use our, enjoy our waterways, and, kind of fold into that, the town's heritage and our economy. Obviously, there's an economic impact to people coming and, enjoying Southampton. Wherever possible, we've tried to identify kind of some broad stroke universal approaches, but we need to ensure flexibility as we look at individual roads and individual locations of those roads. We also talked a lot about coordination of town roads and trustee roads. Eric Schultz has been a member of the committee also, and he's certainly been helpful in providing feedback. And as I said, we looked at some of the beach and fishing facilities as part of this. We still have a lot of work to do, as I think Councilman Lofstad said. We still have to look at a lot of the individual roads in detail. There are some initial recommendations at the end of this PowerPoint. I don't know if we're going to spend a lot of time getting into them. We certainly can. And we have aerial maps of the roads that we've been focusing on, so we can look at those if the board decides to. From a general point of view, we feel that we'd like to recommend that the town add some parking by permit and some seasonal no parking regulations to certain roads, and that we increase the current parking by permit and seasonal no parking areas on certain roads. We also seem to have a general agreement that both the parking by permit and the seasonal no parking regulations, the length of the season should be increased. Right now, parking by permit is July 1st to Labor Day under our current code, and seasonal no parking is May 15th to September 15th under our current code. The one we put out there, the dates April 15th to October 31st. There's a question mark at the end because I think we still want to talk that through further and obviously involve the rest of the board and maybe some of the other stakeholders in what exactly those dates would be. But those are kind of what we were thinking we should work around. And we would probably want the seasonal no parking and the parking by permit time frames to match. The same with parking by permit. The hours generally are 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. There are some roads where it's different, but it's generally 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. And the thought was perhaps we want to extend it to 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. And again, there may be certain exceptions to that rule. We also were careful to make sure that we kind of saved, if you will, some unregulated parking areas on all of these roads so that people that aren't able to get a parking by, aren't able to get a permit or something like that, have an opportunity to come and enjoy, the beach or the waterway. Certainly we would think that people that have the parking by permits are the ones that are residents and use or use our beaches very frequently, but we certainly want to allow some public access for those that aren't able to get a permit. Again, we need to go down and look at all these roads individually again and see how it impacts some town departments. And Kristen may want to speak to that because parks is certainly would be impacted by anything we did. What the impacts on the neighborhoods, the residents, the visitors, look at environmental concerns. There are some of these roads where, as I looked at the parking concerns, a lot of them are, in very fragile strips of land. And I think, we have to keep that in mind as well with regard to the parking. As I said, there are detailed draft recommendations and maps of each road if we want to look at that. I did, before we get to that, just kind of on a broad stroke, I looked, there are basically 6 roads that we're talking about adding parking by permit, and same 6 roads that we're talking about adding seasonal no parking. If we added parking by permit as it's recommended here on those 6 roads, that's about 2,800 feet of added parking by permit on those 6 roads total. In other words, 400 to 500 per road. Total of adding about 112 parking by permit spaces, 110, 120. When you do parallel parking, depends how close you park to the person in front of you or the person behind you, because these would not be marked parking spaces. So, and in terms of seasonal no parking, it's a similar number. We're talking about probably around 2,800 feet of additional seasonal no parking on those same roads. And before we get further into it, the other thing that I think we've all come to a consensus agreement on is that every road end should have minimum 50-foot no parking. And that would be for, safety reasons, emergency reasons. Some of the roads currently have it, some of them don't. Some of them have it in the seasonal no parking section. Some are posted, some aren't. That's another one that we'll have to clean up. There are a number of roads that have no parking signage up when it's actually seasonal no parking, so we'll have to address whether we want to change those to year-round no parking. But I think the idea of saving that last 50 or maybe 75 feet of every road end year-round no parking, I think is something that we again seem to all have agreement on.
Just to explain that, so is that for emergency vehicles to access or vehicles to turn around? What's the purpose of that? No parking area?
Councilman Martell, do you want to speak to that? Because I think you were.
Yeah, I think it's for both, Jay. I think the 50-foot minimum requirements that we have, I've been down to a couple of the road ends and some of the larger emergency vehicles we have would not be able to turn around. It would take backing down those roads in an emergency situation. You know, a small ambulance may have no problem. Some of the roads are very narrow. So they do need to be a little lengthened in the areas where they can turn around. I think that's an easy one to solve.
And Tom, are we required under ADA to provide designated handicap spaces in these areas?
In reading the accessibility guidelines, the guidelines really speak to on-street parking with marked spaces and a sidewalk. So they actually don't technically apply to our area. What we thought we would do, though, in I think the right spirit, would probably reserve perhaps the first 45 feet, roughly 2 parking spaces. A parallel parking space is generally, when it's marked, it's 22 to 24 feet. As I said, on an unmarked area, I think you have to figure 50 feet for somebody to park their car, or I'm sorry, 25 feet for someone to park their car in an unmarked parallel spot. But so we were talking about perhaps 45 or 50 feet of the first parking would be signed to be disability parking. Legally, they say 4% of your spaces if you have under 100 spaces. So I think 2 spaces in each road would probably be meet kind of the spirit of the guidelines.
So you have your 50 feet for emergency vehicles and then 50 feet roughly for ADA. So the first non-ADA space is 100 feet then to the road end. Is that what you're suggesting? That is, no, it's not a long distance, but it's a fair distance.
Yeah, we could tweak those numbers a little bit, but yeah, I think that's kind of what we're thinking.
So Tom, I had a question. Do any of these road ends involve private roads or section of private roads that we need to consider bringing into the system, or getting consensus by the residents of those private roads or those areas? Did you guys consider that? Or does it even?
I'm sorry. No, right now we really don't have an issue with the private roads and the ones that we've looked at. There may be, some others that we've looked at, but right now that doesn't seem to be an issue. Again, if we choose to, or at a later point, if you want to look at the aerial maps of each of the roads, they are at the end of this. I could click through if you want to look at some. But right now, I don't think there's a real issue with private roads being impacted by what we're talking about.
Okay, thank you.
I just may want to revisit that issue in terms of how much area we're reserving. So we might want to reduce the amount for emergency vehicles down to 30 and have 1 disabled space, bringing the total to 50. So just a thought.
Yeah, and again, my thought was, and I went back and forth a little bit, you could have 1 disability space, closest to the beach, and you could have another one halfway down.
I'm also thinking that you don't have to have as big an area for handicapped vehicles if it's the first area is vacant because it's open for the emergency vehicles. It makes it a little bit easier to park. So,
right.
There's nothing in front of it. So I think that having 30 feet for the emergency vehicles and 20 feet for the handicapped, so a total of 50 feet before the non-disabled parking occurs. 100 feet, with your cooler and fishing gear or whatever, that's a bit of a walk. And most of these places, you'll be the only one there. There'll be nobody else there in the future. It's just
right.
You. Now it's not going to feel right, I think, parking 100 feet away. 50 is a little more reasonable.
And I would say, again, guidelines on this type of a road really don't exist, and don't want to spend too much time on this, but disability parking, on-street disability parking where there are no sidewalks is really not something that's encouraged, because there are some issues related to parking on street with no sidewalks and traffic driving by on the other side of your car. But the guidelines, as I said, are about 4% when it's 100 spaces or less, which means if we have 25 spaces on a road, you could make one of 25 and you would still be meeting that 4% guideline. So maybe we look at one space instead of two. That's another thing we could look at.
Yeah, and it's also, I also think these are vistas, and there are some people who, you know, lack the physical ability to maybe to walk down onto that beach, but would be able to park there and enjoy that vista if that first space is reserved for, you know, handicap accessibility. So I think it's probably a good idea to have that 20 feet reserved, you know, and then you have the 30 feet for emergency access, and then you have the beach. So.
And I did see one in one of the roads, and I think it's just one, the regulation said, you know, it was 50 feet, no parking except disability. So you could kind of merge the ideas a little bit.
And you're talking, some of these places is parking on both sides of the road, and some, it's just one side of the road, right?
Again, when you look at them, we've tried to do a little bit in the past, and I've kind of run with this time is, in residential neighborhoods on some of these streets, you have homes on one side of the street and you have open space on the other side of the street. Generally, the ideas we've recommended, or I've recommended, it's been done previously, the seasonal no parking is on the side of the street where there are homes. The open space side is where we've tried to put the parking, because we all know nobody likes cars parked in front of their house. So that's a little bit of what's driving it also, is to have the no parking areas on the residential, where the homes are, have the parking on the, where there may be where there may be open space or more widely spaced properties.
Okay. All right, continue, please.
Before you continue, Tom, I have a question about some of the handicap parking. Would they be ADA compliant, or would we have to put more amenities in at these road ends?
Well,
curb, I don't know, a ramp to somewhere or something.
Well, again, the open parking like we're talking about is not really covered in the ADA, because they really address areas that are more developed, that have sidewalks and have marked spaces. Mm-hmm. So we're actually, I think, even going a little erring on the side of the good thing in putting in disability spaces. I cannot find anything where there are requirements with regard to disability parking on the roads, that the type of roads we're talking about. We can check further, but I have not been able to. I went a couple of different sources, and I can't really find any real firm guidelines on this type of parking.
All right, so let's continue on with the presentation.
I don't know, Julie or Rick, if you want to walk in, do we want to discuss any of this? We could look at some of the roads if you'd like. That will speak a little bit to.
I have a 1 o'clock state call that I'd like to be on, so okay. It's fine. We can go through it. So I might ask the board to recess for a short while if we're still going past 1. So.
Well, Councilman Martell, Councilman Lofstad, would you prefer we kind of hold off on this? Because you know this, we can get into very detailed discussions when we get down to drilling into this.
I think the time to pick on the individual roads is down the road, so we don't really have to do it now. I would ask that Tommy John, if you could weigh in the future on the 30 or 50 foot emergency vehicle access at the end of the roads, what you feel comfortable with. I know that East Landing Road in Hampton Bays right now is 50 foot. And the road is pretty narrow. If you're ever driving by, take a look at that and just see what you think as far as, you know, we ever had a catastrophe down the beach or had to have a fire engine pull somebody out of the ice or something like that, that we could, you know, it was a workable amount of space. But I think we can hold off on the individual roads for a while.
And I'd like to hear from Kristen, because I know that she had some concerns, and I think that whatever she has to offer, that we need to hear from her.
Thanks. Yeah, I think anything that we change, particularly in terms of the timeframes for when permits are required. There will be, effects on staff and also people's ability to access waterways. So those are things we're going to have to continue to discuss and think of the cause and effect. And then, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought.
I think you wanted to talk about possibly as a priority, working on enacting the permit length. Was that something I know we talked about in our session?
Well, yeah, well, you're talking about in terms of during COVID right now. Because we did have discussion also about, this is obviously we realize that there are some changes that should be made to the road ends on a permanent basis. But we also are in the midst of entering into the shoulder season where our permit regulations typically go through Labor Day. So I think we should discuss if we want to extend that right now, potentially through an executive order, because I don't know that these regulations will be in place in time for that. And I do have some thoughts on, what that time frame might look like. I don't know if you want to get into that now or separately, since they're kind of like two separate issues.
Right. I think the real shorthand on the transitioning to some permanent changes in regulations is, as the board knows, all of these all these topics we're talking about would require public hearings. If we change the length of the permits or seasonal no parking, all of them would require public hearings. And we were doing a little looking at the calendar yesterday, and I think even if we moved quickly, even on the permit, for example, to extend it, we couldn't have a town board, there couldn't probably be a public hearing and possible adoption until September 22nd. So I think that's what Kristen's alluding to. Her permit expires on what, Labor Day?
Labor Day, and a lot of people are still out here. There's still limited activities that people could do. We had a very warm September, October last season. So, and we do still have capacity requirements that we have to stick to under New York State for the beaches, the 50%. So, I could foresee if you get a nice, some nice days in September, that you could have, some capacity issues on the beaches.
These areas, these roads, they're all fall in the category of, before the pandemic at least, they were all unregulated. You had parking, but unrestricted.
Pretty much all of these were not regulated before. There were a couple that were regulated, but the signage wasn't up or the signage wasn't correct. So they were really, in effect, not if you drove down the street, you wouldn't have seen signs that regulated them. So yes, most of these streets that we're talking about.
Okay, and there's 13 of these roads. I would like to see which of the 13, not necessarily go over it right now in terms of, the design for the restrictions, but I would like to see that. But before we do, I just have one quick question for Kristen. When we provide parking at these road ends, is there a point where we have, under the county regulations, we have to provide either lifeguard facilities or porta potties or anything like that? Is there a trigger where we have to provide other services?
That's a good question, because we do have to get bathing beach permits through the county for our lifeguarded beaches. But I think as soon as the lifeguards go away, you don't necessarily have to, comply with any permitting, but I would have to look further into that.
Okay. We might want to take a quick look at that too, because
yeah,
cost prohibitive if we had to start providing lifeguards at these road ends.
I mean, as far as the road ends, we never have lifeguards.
Right.
So, I'm just thinking more in terms of the bigger beach facilities. There's 8 of them where we have lifeguards in attendance in the summer, but I mean, the access roads have always been accessible 365 and,
Right.
it never necessitated a separate permit.
Yeah, a lot of them were the access for driving onto the beach. Now we're also their access for parking and walking onto the beach. But yeah, maybe take a quick look at the guidelines there. So Tom, maybe could you just run us through what the 13 roads are that?
Yeah, let me tell you we're talking about adding regulations on 7 or 8 of those.
Okay.
We looked at some other ones, but kind of the jury is still out on that, or after police assessment, we feel we don't need to act. Just to run through them right now, the roads that we're looking at regulations on, either adding to the existing ones in a couple of cases or putting in regulations that have never been there. West Landing, Petrel, which is right off of it's the one on the upper left here that we happen to be looking at right now. Petrel is a town road right off of West Landing that's never been regulated, but may need some regulations. East Landing, Sunset Avenue has regulations, but we may be looking to modify those.
Can you scroll through as you do those?
I'm sorry, what?
Whoever has got their screen shared, it just, as you go through the roads, just.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's me. Okay, that's West Landing and East Landing. Here's Sunset Avenue, where we may want to, there are regulations in effect, but there's a problem with some late evening usage, and this is one of the places where the current regulations don't seem to go late enough into the evening, so we may need to modify that. Elder Avenue, which is on your right side, we've had a request, but so far it doesn't appear that we would need to do anything on Elder Avenue. Foster Avenue, down, this is kind of what I call Foster Avenue Extension, although it's technically still part of Foster Avenue. That area down by the marinas, the Bay Constables say there is a bit of an issue with parking down there. So we think we need to do something down there. Have a couple of thoughts on that. North Sea Road, which is on the right side of your screen right now, has never had regulations, and we are proposing regulations go in there. Sabonic Inlet Road on the left side of your screen, again, has had no regulations, and we do think that regulations are going to be needed there. Town Point Road also, I believe, has some regulations, but I think we're looking to extend them. I'm sorry, there are no regulations on Town Point Road, so that's one that has no regulations that we are going to recommend regulations there. The next one, Far Pond Road, again, we've had requests, but that I think needs some further evaluation. Shrubland Road, it's near the water. There's been one expression of concern about cars parking where that little green dot is. But again, the police assessment so far and my assessment so far is there's probably no need for regulations there. Cold Springs Road. This is one of the roads where what's in the town code is not posted correctly. Everything kind of to the right of the bend in the road that you see there, there's no signage up. So those signs both need to be corrected as you're closer to the water, and they need to be extended as you're farther from the water. So there are some regulations, but that needs to be further addressed in posting of the signage. Flying Point Road, it's a heavily regulated road, number of overlapping regulations on this road. This is another one that the Bay Constables feel we may need to look at a little longer. That's interesting, and that right by the Channel Bridge, we currently have 24/7 parking by permit regulations because of fishing issues that have gone on there in the past. And that may be the model for some other places. But those regulations only start on Memorial Day. So that's another one I think we may need to modify the existing regulations.
What about Town Line Road? Is that? Not an issue?
Town Line Road, glad you brought that up. We've had some discussions about some roads, but they're in Sagaponack. So, our understanding is that the village would have to enact those regulations. We obviously enforce the regulations, but, and a number of Sagaponack roads are still on our town code.
Well,
But at
didn't
this
we,
point, I think the village would have to enact those regulations.
Didn't we on like Gibson Pond, whatever that is, Peters Pond over there?
Yep.
Yeah, Gibson and Peters Pond are both parking by permit.
They already are? Or
Yes.
that's part of the pandemic regulations?
No, they are.
And what about Town Line?
Town Line, there's existing no parking on the west side of the road as you go down towards the beach. Again, that was pre-existing, when the town still had jurisdiction. Apparently, there's been a change over there because my understanding is that in the past, if you parked on the east side of Town Line Road with a Southampton permit, the East Hampton Town Police would allow you to do that because that's the line. The east side of the road is under East Hampton Town jurisdiction. But apparently the police used to not ticket cars there with a Southampton permit. My understanding is that changed this year. I did get a number of complaints from people who said, we always used to be able to park there. Now we're getting tickets for parking there. But I don't think that, again, is our...
I think then maybe the no parking area on the west side of the road ought to be Southampton Town only. That we should not have our residents prohibited from that beach, which is sort of used by both Southampton and East Hampton residents. That the restrictions that East Hampton put in place have effectively barred Southampton residents from using that beach. So I think that we need to address that either by some reciprocal agreement with East Hampton on their side of the street, or making one side the East Hampton side and one side the Southampton side. So
yes, the Lieutenant Kiernan and Sergeant Miller, who've been part of our committee, also, asked that we address the Sagaponack part of it. So I think that's a good suggestion, and so we'll pursue that.
Are we going to be seeing then a hearing on each of these individually, or are we going to do one package? What is the plan, Tom?
I want to talk further with the town attorney's office. Some of these are handled differently in different sections of the code when we first wrote them up. I mean, ideally, it would be nice to just come in with, one public hearing for all the ones we're going to, the seasonal or no parking, and one public hearing for all the ones that we want to modify the parking by permit. And then, maybe a public hearing with regard to a blanket, whether it's 50 feet or whatever, the blanket, no parking. Like to limit them as much as possible, but I do want to speak to the town attorney's office because some of them are in different sections or subsections of the code.
Okay,
And
go ahead.
I was going to say, I do just want to add that whenever a road goes from, some of these are highway road ends or trustee road ends, when we add parking by permit on a road, it falls more under the parks purview because we're the ones who oversee the parking by permit. So I just want to add that it does put more responsibility typically on our department when these roads come under parking by permit, because then once a permit is required, people start asking for, well, we want a garbage can there. It also triggers the no dogs. That law comes into effect because any road that's parking by permit is subject to no dogs between July 1st and Labor Day between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. So then we're responsible for putting those signs up, and then, people want the mutt mitt dispensers. And so it kind of snowballs into now when something goes wrong, we get the phone call. And I just want the town board to be aware of that, is that when you do add these, it does tend to add more to our plate.
All right, that's a really important point, Kristen. And, the no dogs on the beach laws, I think that's something we're going to have to figure out and bring into this conversation. We might have to change that if it's not our intention to ban the dogs on the beach between those hours. Then we need to specify it in a different change of law. So, and the garbage can issue is a great issue too. And so I think we'll continue that piece of the conversation. So I am running out of time. I only have about 4 minutes before my state call. Is there anything quick on this?
Yeah, I'd like our attorney's office to fully evaluate the liability aspects of putting in parking in terms of the town's increased exposure. If God forbid something happens, maybe a dog bites somebody or somebody, if there's an accident and we have parking lines down there, to what extent does that pull the town in more with those lines than it does now? I'm curious about that.
Are we proposing putting lines in? I don't know whether we're going
Or
to be
parking spaces with the, okay, not lines.
just signage, right?
Right.
Tom, are we proposing painting the street?
No, no, we're just talking about signage.
Okay.
But your question is still valid. I don't know that Sean would be prepared to answer that. But let's.
Yeah, it's not for now. It's
really not. It's really not for now, and that might be at a time when we have a public hearing, something that we could get the information. So what's the next?
We're happy to look into that though, and I have been on the calls as well. So we're going to work with that committee.
All right. All right, Tom. What's the next step here?
I think our working group is hoping to get a little deeper into the details of each of these roads. Hopefully, we've been doing once a week conferences, and I think we'd like to do that again next week. And then, again, come back to the board maybe in 2 weeks and go through these individual roads, because at a certain point, we will have to either have we'll have to have public hearings. The board would have to decide whether you want to have any kind of public input sessions prior to that. But I think we come back in 2 weeks and say, we all agree, here's what we should do on each of these roads.
So I'm going to continue the executive orders that have pertained to these roads. I have to renew them every 5 days, which is a bit of work, but that is the plan at this point until the board adopts something, or the pandemic subsides, or the circumstances have changed so much that I feel that they're no longer necessary. So,
Jay, one thing I want to mention with that is that we currently have, when the pandemic hit, we made some changes and we put new decals over all the signage, but those decals go through Labor Day. So if you're going to continue the order, I don't know if you have
it may not be necessary past Labor Day to continue the order.
Right, but I think what Kristen is saying is she would need to order something, so it may or may not, but do we want to be prepared? Is that correct, Kristen?
Yeah, and I guess if you were going to continue extending it until, until we had a better grip on what the shoulder season capacity is going to be, I don't know if we could leave the signage open-ended, like permit required until further notice or something like that, so there's no end date on it.
All right, I have to jump on this other call. So thank you, Kristen. You and I can continue to discuss that as it pertains to the executive orders. If I am going to extend it past Labor Day, whether that's going to require some changes in signage. If there's I know I wanted to do updates. So would the board prefer to recess for a half an hour, or just end this and go into executive session after my 1 o'clock call?
Personally, I would prefer to end it and go into exec session. I have a hard cutoff at 3 o'clock for a county committee meeting.
Okay, all right. So, and I do have to get on this call. If there's no other objections to that, I'd like to then end the work session and go into executive session. I will try to be done by 1:30. So let's set executive session for 1:30 for acquisitions, confidential legal advice, and personnel matters. Okay, that's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Lofstad. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks all.